Hey Crushers, today's video topic will be covering 3 teams for Guild War in 3 vs 3. Although the topic itself is very straightforward, it is a lot easier said than done. We'll be covering some of the intricacies of the subject and offer some ideas on how you can better prepare yourself for the coverage required. I'll preface today's topic by stating that this will ultimately involve making a choice between consolidating your resources to focus on 10 heroes for Arena, or spreading your resources out to cover 30 heroes for Guild War in 3 vs 3. This video is mainly aimed at mid-game players and those starting on endgame or late-game builds. There is good news. Even though you're focusing on 30 heroes, you really only need to dump heavily into 15 to 20 heroes for maximum success. For simplicity, we'll be using 3 vs 3 as our template for this, but the same general idea will apply for Guild War. I would just caution you to choose your matchups in Guild War a bit more selectively. There are several components required for 3 teams. The first is your primary tank and appropriate elemental debuffer. The second is an attack speed debuffer. The third is an appropriate DPS. The fourth and final is support heroes primarily in place for their 4-star abilities. These support heroes include buffers, debuffers, and crowd control. For ease of explanation, I'll be using Ice Cube, Shelly, and Gladiator as the main tanks. Ice Cube pairs with Thorn, Shelly pairs with Namada, and Gladiator pairs with Spark. Out of these heroes, only the tank really has to be built strong, though the elemental debuffers all warrant viability in the right circumstances. Generally speaking though, I would say that with a focus on 3 teams, this is not the right circumstance, and their resources should be split out for other heroes. I acknowledge that I have my own Thorn built, but this is mainly due to the frequency, which I run her for Arena to support my Ice Cube and to thwart enemy Vlad heals. The tanks, however, need a heavy focus, and I'd say making them all 8-7s or 8-8s is not a bad move for most players. It doesn't matter how good your backline heroes are built if your tanks don't stay alive long enough to protect them. The second major component to these teams we'll be looking at is an enemy attack speed debuffer. There are only 3 of these, and they are Vlad, Tomo, and Kasume. I favor pairing Tomo with Gladiator, mainly because I'm likely to toss other earth buffers in there. However, it is likely that your opponent will run water heroes against your Shelly. Due to that, it would be better to put a maxed and built Tomo with Shelly to help combat and kill enemy water threats. I like pairing my Vlad with Ice Cube, mainly because I'm likely to run Trickster with my Thorn to maximize the efficiency of my poison. It is pretty likely that I'll run at least one dark buffer in there, making that matchup most efficient for me. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter which enemy attack speed debuffer is in which grouping, but this is how I choose to do it myself. Choosing what heroes to run for DPS can be very tricky, but it really depends on what heroes you have maxed and what heroes you can rune properly for DPS. From there, we want to focus on favorably setting your DPS. The amount that you'll need is going to be 2 to 3 per team, generally speaking. All of our teams at this point should have 3 heroes in them, so our goal here is to get each of these teams to 6 heroes with the DPS we intend to use for each team. We'll worry about those final 4 spots at the end. So there are 2 ways you can do this. Either you can run elementally, the same as your tank, and plan to run additional element-specific buffers, or you can run elemental opposite to your tank in an attempt to bait your enemy into running DPS against your DPS element. What I mean by this last part is if you're running Shelly, you could run a lot of water DPS heroes in an attempt to bait your enemy into using earth DPS against you. Shelly survives against earth attacks a lot better than water attacks, giving your backline more time to do what they need to do. Let's start with our first team here. As I mentioned, I like running Trickster with Thorn, so I'll go ahead and pick him as one of the 3 DPS heroes I'm choosing for this team. My second choice will be Monkey Mary, to add some fire DPS and crowd control to the mix, and hopefully get my other DPS some nice skips. For my final choice, I plan to try drawing attention away from my Ice Cube and Thorn by running my Scud. The hope here is that the enemy will see fire and run water DPS instead of earth. We'll give this better focus on the next step. Moving to the second team, I love running water DPS with Kasume, and the same general idea is being employed to bait enemy DPS away from the tank element. Adding diversity of elements prevents mono-element teams from being so devastating. So we're going to run Atlantis as our primary water DPS. I'll next choose Kage, as he'll soften the enemy hero HP considerably, making Atlantis' AoE hits much more devastating. I'll wrap up this team with Monkey Rabati, allowing his global buff and amazing smasher capabilities to solidify the second DPS team. For our third team, we're going to start with Seraph, allowing her to offer light and dark DPS coverage. Then I'll bring in Torch, who offers a massive amount of fire DPS. I'm also going to grab my Dark Hunter, because Seraph buffs him, and this team needs a little more help dealing with enemy DPS since my Gladiator is only 8-7 instead of 8-8 like my other tanks. Going back to Team 1, we're going to start by adding buffers, debuffers, and crowd control. These are primarily unbuilt heroes I'm only running for their 4-star abilities. I'll start with Monkey King, adding the threat of stun and drawing more attention to fire. Then I'll grab Monkey Mortar to buff dark DPS. Then, because I really want to draw attention to fire, I'm going to place Alda here. And let's wrap up Team 1 with Kasai. Alda adding a global crit chance buff for my DPS heroes, and Kasai increasing my fire hero DPS, making them more of a threat. And there we have Team 1. Notice how easy it is to overlook my Ice Cube now. That's the effect I was going for. Next we'll add to Team 2. First off, I want Manta and Frost Queen to really increase my water hero threat level. This means I'll also need to take advantage of Aqua for her water attack speed buff. Aqua is a rare hero who can be built as a DPS hero, so if you run her as one, she'd fit in well for this kind of scenario. I'll eventually build her up again, but that's not something I'm looking at doing right now. For that final slot, I want my Valkyrie, another potential DPS hero. I'm using her here for her water freezes and 4-star ability, buffing my DPS potential through crit chance buffing. Freeze also adds crowd control to your second team. Finally, Team 3. You'll notice that I'm kinda down to scraps here, but that's okay. I'll start with taking Onyx for her global attack buff, then I'll pop down and grab both Green Fairy and Angelica, both of which I'm running more or less for their RNG potential to swing a fight back in my favor. And speaking of RNG, that makes this the perfect spot for Cersei, finishing off Team 3. Now you might be thinking, but Young, we only need to set 2 defensive teams for Guild War. You're right. You may also be thinking, but Young, we only need to win 2 out of the 3 matchups in 3 vs 3. You're right, yet again. The tricky part to this guide is that you need 3 attacking teams for Guild War and 3 defensive teams for 3 vs 3. This has overall been to show you options to get yourself to a 3-team coverage. However, recall how we're really only focusing heavily on our tanks, DPS, and then to a lesser extent our debuffers and buffers. That means that most of your power can be easily consolidated into 2 teams, and you can take your best of your best for your arena team. When it comes down to it, the best recipe for success is going to involve spreading out based on what heroes you have maxed and what heroes you have runes to run properly. Everything else you do factors around those aspects, so keep that in mind when considering my advice here. You really have to cater this to your own specific needs, and hopefully you walk away from this video with a stronger understanding of what you can do to find success. As I conclude today's video, I'd like to thank several Discord users who helped contribute to the content covered today. Namely, I'd like to thank Belmont, Mithras, Madwad, USO Remix, Alathor, and Mr. Moogle. I'd also like to thank users such as yourself who watch my videos and encourage me to continue making content. Your contributions are more appreciated than you know. If you'd like to support this channel in other ways, there are several things you can do. Comments, likes, and subscribing are great ways to show your support. You can also show your support financially by contributing to my Patreon. The link to becoming a patron of this YouTube channel is in the description below this video as well. That's all the time we have for today. I appreciate you watching this video through to the very end. Thanks for watching.